Okay, so sharing my screen. Just a reminder, guys, today I'm seeing more than around 15 participants so far, and I'm hoping there'll be more who will join in. In any event that you are going to have an important job to be done at a particular time during this training or a call, client call that you need to take or any emergency that you need to attend, please inform the respective organizer. So today Mahima is around. So please do inform Mahima that about your availability or unavailability for whatever period. Um, do not forget to take the assessment test. It will give you an idea of how well you have been able to understand the various fundamentals, concepts, and the services of AWS. Whatever it may be, you may be able to answer many of them, all of them, whatever it is. Let us give it a try. It is a learning process. So I hope you will stay back and complete the test, and then we will go ahead and try and evaluate those answers later on. So
Absolutely.
please
We
do
would
not
request
drop off. Yeah.
everyone to stay by the end of the session. As Sudhakar has rightly said, today we will be conducting a post assessment. It'll take like 15 minutes by the end of the session. I hope all of you will stick with us till the end of the session today. Over to you, Sudhakar.
Okay. Thanks, Mahima. And as I mentioned, if I do ask you questions, guys, I hope all of you have your microphone ready and you should respond to my answers, to the questions that I check with you. So please make an attempt either to answer the question or whatever it is. Let me know what it is the difficulty you are facing in the event you can't answer. So, but do not be silent or do not vanish away from this meeting suddenly, telling me later on that I lost my connection and so on. So, or my microphone is not working. Is anybody having an issue with the microphone right now? Is anybody logged in on their mobile? So I hope
No.
everyone. So I hope everyone here is well aware of the ground instructions that has been provided to you by your management, and that you can continue to follow the same without informing the coordinator or the organizer. Please do not leave the session till 2 o'clock. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen, and we are going to go ahead and to our AWS session. Last time, if you remember, we had started off with Elastic Beanstalk, and unfortunately, we came across an error which did not allow us to complete our stack. And so the whole issue was because of not creating a role. Actually, AWS is supposed to create a role automatically, but they only indicate that the role has been created. Unfortunately, the role does not get created. So the only thing we can go and do is we'll first have to create a role, and then we can go ahead and look at the environment that we can set up for our application. Okay, so I hope please log in to your console, and in the console, make sure you're in the Oregon region on the right hand side top. Ankit, next to that regions, you have a question mark which indicates a support icon. Do you see that?
Yes, Sudhakar.
Yes. Yeah. So go into the support center and you will be able to raise a case or an email if they do provide you that option as well. So you have a technical issue, so just go here into the technical, and then you can go and start a case. I think you can create a case here. Notice here at the right hand side, we have an orange button. So click on create a case and then mention all of whatever you follow. So you can go ahead and technical support is unavailable under the basic support plan. So you may not be able to go through this. So directly write and yeah, write through the account and billing. Just give them the general indication that you're having some issues and how best to approach them for this particular case. So write an email to them and that should help you out.
Okay.
And So let's go back to our particular elastic beanstalk. And as we said, we are going to go ahead and create a role. We need to create a role. In fact, we wanted, we thought that the role was created by AWS, but as I mentioned earlier, that error we got was because no role was created. So to create a role, we will have to go into a service called IAM, or Identity and Access Management, which we shall be seeing today a little later. But currently what you can do is you can duplicate your screen, right click, click on duplicate, and then in that duplicate, in the search box for your services, you can click on IAM. So you can click on IAM and go to IAM. You'll see there manage access to AWS resources. And one of the entities that you can create under IAM is this roles. So this is what we are going to go ahead and click. So click on IAM, will be in the IAM dashboard. And in the IAM dashboard, here Identity and Access Management, or IAM in short, you'll see the dashboard. Under the dashboard, you will see there are certain IAM resources, and one of them is roles. You can either click on whatever number of roles is indicated for you, or you can click on the roles on the left-hand side panel, whichever you feel you're comfortable with. So click on roles, and it will list you some of the roles that has been created. And then now the role that we are going to create is going to be an AWS Elastic Beanstalk EC2 role. So what you need to do is, let me just go ahead and show you the whole. So create a role, click on create a role. And here the trusted entity type, there are 5 different types that we can create roles for different use cases. So the first use case is typically for AWS services which can interact with other services. It's because unless every service is given permissions to work with any other permission, only then you can use uh, such interactions. Otherwise, you have to create a necessary role. And in organizations, these roles are generally created by administrators and not allowed to be created by all users. So let us say you wanted to create a service which needs to interact with Elastic Beanstalk. So we are going to use an EC2 instance. So EC2 instance is what will be interacting in Elastic Beanstalk. So we will select under use case, under common use cases, the service called EC2, and then we are going to go into next. In the next, we are going to select 3 policies. Now, a policy is a set of permissions. So permission policies, or what we are going to do is we are setting up permissions for this EC2 service, and the permission policies is relating to Elastic Beanstalk. So we are going to say Elastic Beanstalk, enter, and there will be 3 particular roles that you will need to provide. One is the web tier, one is the worker tier, and the third is the multi-container Docker. So you can expand this. So Elastic Beanstalk multi-container Docker. So these 3 permissions, you have to give it for the particular Elastic EC2 instance, so that it will be able to work with this when they interacts with Elastic Beanstalk. So we select 3 of these policies, that is Elastic Beanstalk web tier, worker tier, and multi-container Docker under add permissions. We go down and click on next. And in the role name, please give the name AWS Elastic Beanstalk EC2 role. So give it a name called AWS Elastic Beanstalk EC2 role. And then what you need to do is just go down and create the role. Just let me confirm, guys. Let me confirm the name is the same. Yeah, AWS Elastic Beanstalk EC2 role. So this I created having these three policies: Elastic Beanstalk Web Tier, Worker Tier, Multi-Container Tier, and then go ahead and create a policy. So that was the role that was created. So go ahead and create this role: AWS-Elastic Beanstalk EC2 role. Create this role, and once this role is created, it is basically allowing any of your EC2 instances which will call AWS services on your behalf. So for example, it may want to uh, talk to load balancers, auto scaling groups, and other services, CloudWatch alarms, and so on. So apparently we need permissions for all of those, and therefore we are creating a role. Once you have created a role, let's go back to our Elastic Beanstalk and quickly start up. Same process that we did on Friday. So we'll click on Create Application. We will go through the default, which is a web server environment, and give it a name, My App, or whatever name you want to give. It's a free-form text that you can set up. Environment information, you leave it as it is. And in the managed platform, you can select whatever platform you would like to work with. So let us say I select a Ruby platform. You can select Python, you can select PHP, Java, .NET, Docker, Go, whatever is a platform you are very comfortable working in. So typically use that platform or you're very familiar with. And we are going to upload a sample application. We don't have an application of our own. So we are going to use a sample application automatically that is being provisioned by AWS. And then we are going to make sure we are going to create only a single instance, which is a free tier eligible, again, which will be one of those T2.micro or T3.micro or T4.micro. And then we go to next. In the next option, we are going to go ahead and notice here, we are going to, in the service role, is where we are going to use an existing service role. So it says existing service role. So one of which is AWS Elastic Beanstalk service role. Plus, we may not want to select, or we can select a key pair if required. So you can select a key pair. And then in the EC2 instance profile, you should be able to see your role that we just created. In the EC2 instance profile, the role should appear. And so if this role appears, that means your stack will get created successfully. If nothing appears there, automatically that means the role was not present. So earlier this role used to appear, the name used to appear, but then of course there was no role automatically created by AWS. So we had to do this right now manually and then automatically select this, and then we can go and skip to review. And we are on the last step. We don't need to do anything else, configure any of the backend or the infrastructure parts of this networks and the scaling and the load balancing metrics, any of those. So just go ahead and click on submit. So just by indicating a platform, using your application code and indicating a name of your application with a service role, automatically you can set up Elastic Beanstalk. And so if you now notice, your events would have started and it has started creating, it would be creating a bucket in S3 storage. It has mentioned that this bucket is meant for storing your environment data. And then it has started creating a security group for your particular instance. They have named it AWS EB, Elastic Beanstalk Security Group, with a unique ID again. And then following, it will continue with the remaining events. So they create Elastic IP. Notice here EIP, which is an Elastic IP. And the environment health has transitioned to pending. So there is currently no instances, but then they will start launching an instance, which should come up shortly. And then it has created an instance waiting for the instances to launch. This may take a few minutes. Instance deployment has been completed successfully. That means there's an instance that has been launched. An EC2 instance has been launched, but still the health needs to be okay. If you scroll on top, it is still pending. So it should come back to okay or errors. Either one of the two status it will should report. Okay means successful. So notice here environment has been successfully launched is the final message. Health is okay. And then if you notice your events, after it added an instance, the instance ID is displayed to your environment. It has transitioned from pending to okay, and now the application is available at a particular URL. So they have given you an URL here. You don't have to select this URL, and then finally successfully launched your environment. This is the environment that has been launched. So it took about 2 minutes. So 10:16 we started our initiation of our environment, and 10:18 it has successfully launched. So within 2 minutes, it has set up the necessary instances, security groups, elastic IPs, storage bucket, and all of these it has completed. And therefore now we can go ahead and verify whether our application has been deployed successfully. You can notice here a domain under the at the top. If you go to the environment overview section, you will see a domain, and under the domain you'll find the link for the URL for your particular application. So if you click on this URL, you should be able to see the application that has been deployed, and it should show you this message. Congratulations, your first AWS Elastic Beanstalk Ruby application is now running in your own dedicated environment in the AWS cloud. So this color red is specific to the platform. So Ruby platform does indicate or is appearing in a red background. But if you choose a different environment, you may be seeing a different background color. So it may be blue, it may be green, it may be gray. So it all depends. So depending on the environment you have chosen, you may. So anybody who has done here with Python,
Yes, I have done.
what is your what is
It's
your
showing
background?
it is showing warning, health showing warning.
Why? What happened? Did you create an appropriate role?
Yeah, I created.
And then where is what is the
I'll
warning?
I'll present my screen.
Okay.
This
Okay. So come down. Click on your application. Warning service. Yeah, it does show you the message. Okay, there is a warning. So here you can
Sudhakar,
note. Yeah,
even I am getting warning and I selected Ruby.
you selected Ruby.
Even then, yeah, same warning that someone is showing right away, right?
Okay.
Although I'm open to, able to open this domain
URL.
address, right? Yes,
Right. Yeah.
it will open just with warning, yeah.
Service role is missing permissions assigned to check for uh, managed updates, verify the roles policy. So it has used which version of uh, what is this Python? I think 3.1. Yeah, running
3.1.
1.1. It is running 3. I'm not. Okay, is this the latest version in Python?
Yeah, it is the latest one.
Okay. Okay. It is only a warning anyway, so you may have to just look up, put up this error in Google and check out what could be the reason for the same.
Okay, is there any warning code? Where
No,
can I
there's
find?
no warning code. The message itself, the details. The entire
Okay.
retail, whatever it is, the whole statement, you can just copy and paste, and
Okay.
then they may come up with several answers. Some forums will give you some different. You'll have to just make sure that you're looking at the right perspective. They may be directing you to some irrelevant answers as well. So it is important to narrow down these answers to the particular one relating to the elastic beanstalk. So just try
Okay.
and put this message and check out if you're getting some information on that.
Okay.
Otherwise, the next course of action is to write an email to AWS and checking with
Okay.
them as to why you are getting this warning.
Okay.
Okay, anybody seeing here as error severe? Anybody seeing it as an error?
Sudhakar, I'm facing those same issue, those same four errors.
Okay, I understand. If you are also, so all of those, if you're facing a similar issue, that if there is a warning, then automatically you'll have to pick up that message of that warning and try and diagnose or try to check out what could be the reason through either your forums, Google, or internet resources, or you can write to AWS and find out what could be the actual cause. But if you had selected Ruby, automatically for me, I have selected Ruby. Ruby 3.0 is running, and for me, it has not given me any kind of a warning as such. I hope all of you have successfully created the log. I don't know, probably somewhere it will, in logs, maybe, no logs, monitoring, whether it shows any. I don't know where it can possibly show you an. So it shows you certain amount of metrics here. Alarms, any alarm or warning. Check out in alarms tab if they're showing any kind of a warning here. Sometimes it shows a warning in alarms, managed updates, or maybe there is a managed updates that has been scheduled for this environment. It said something about managed updates in that warning. So just verify if there is something in this that can give you more information. Okay, anybody selected any other platform, Java or PHP?
Yeah, Sudhakar, I have selected Java, but
Uh-huh.
uh, like it's still in a pending state, actually.
Why has it not completed the
No,
instance
it's
creation?
in the last information it is giving is environment health has transitioned to pending
Yeah, that
initialization in
was
progress,
yeah, that
and
was
there are no
quite some
instance.
time.
Yeah, it's
That,
been close to like 5 minutes. It's more than 7 minutes actually.
in
I can
fact,
share
it
my
should
screen.
not take so much time for an instance to be launched. So, okay, are you the only
Yeah.
one who's facing no I mean the environment not having been launched successfully? Everybody else, whoever is performing, is someone else also facing a similar issue? Okay, what I would suggest is wait for a minute or more, or then you can go and again terminate this environment if it has not completed the same. You can go into actions and you can go and terminate the environment. Or if you go into environments, it may already appear as a terminated. So if it's already terminated by the system, then automatically it will not be proceeding. So check whether the environment has already been terminated. And therefore, if it is terminated, it may still be showing pending and still
Um,
trying to process. If not,
Sudhakar,
yeah,
yeah, you're not sharing the screen.
okay. Yeah, so go into environments. In environments, so we had been here in this scenario on this screen, and we were seeing the environment. And in case it is still showing pending or it's still processing at the top, then go back to your environments tab and check whether it has terminated. If not terminated, you can go into actions, select this environment, terminate it and retry and do this a lab again. But now the role has been created and you have selected the role, there should not be any issues in getting your application deployed and your URL should be available. So click on terminate environment and then enter the name of the environment to confirm. So this is your environment. So copy the environment, paste it into the text box, confirm or say terminate. Your environment will automatically be terminated. And in the meantime, you'll have to go to your application and delete your application. So select your application. On top, you have an application. So the application is separate from the environment. So go and delete your application. And then you can paste and remove the environment and delete the application. So right now, if you go to your Elastic Beanstalk, you should be back to your applications. In fact, if you check out, there should be no applications or the application status should be deleted. Or it has to wait till the environment is completely, so you can wait. So if you go into the environment, it is pending because until it removes all of those resources. So it's waiting for the instances to terminate. Then it has removed the instance. It will remove the particular Elastic IP. It will remove the security group. Only thing is it will not remove the storage or the S3 bucket. That will continue to remain. I'm not sure why they keep it pending. So they have deleted an SNS topic. They have deleted the security group. They have deleted the Elastic IP. Notice they have removed or released. They have released the Elastic IP and removed the instance. So they have performed the necessary thing. So there are no environments now. It has been terminated. So applications, there should be no applications. And there are no applications. Okay, so we are being able to check this out. And now we have also checked out the deployment successfully. And now let us quickly just go to our EC2 dashboard to confirm that there are no instances, no security groups, no Elastic IP. So there was one instance that was created, but now there was one additional security group. But now we have the standard default WebSG and the DBSG that we created for RDS. There's no Elastic IP as well. So we are sure now all of those resources have been removed. Now let's go to S3. In S3, we'll be still seeing the storage bucket that they have created for the environment data. So you'll notice here the Elastic Beanstalk US West 2. So select this and empty this bucket. So you'll need to copy this entire bucket name or type permanently delete. So here it is permanently delete for first emptying the bucket. So it has successfully emptied the bucket. So having emptied the bucket, try to delete and it should not allow you to delete the bucket. So go ahead and try to delete the bucket. And the bucket cannot be deleted. So you cannot delete your bucket. And why is this? Let us see. Let us go to our bucket itself. Go to the properties. And in the properties, they will see a policy. That means we have to go into permissions. We have to go into permissions. In permissions, we'll notice there is a bucket policy. Now, in the bucket policy, if you scroll to the end, if you scroll to the bottom part of that bucket policy, you will know an action is provided for the bucket, which is to delete the bucket. The action is to delete the bucket. The bucket is this particular bucket name that has been created by AWS. But the effect they mention here is deny. The effect here is deny. Deny meaning it does not allow you to delete the bucket. Allow here, so if there's an allow, for example, here there's an allow. When it says allow, you can look at the buckets, you can look at the objects, all of these you can do. You can add an object, allow here to put an object. So notice here, it allows you to put an object into that bucket, but it does not allow you to delete the bucket. So either you can edit this policy and change this effect to allow, and then go and delete the bucket, or else you can go and directly delete the policy itself. Either way, you can edit and make that allow, save it, and then go and delete the bucket, or you can directly delete the bucket policy. So if you delete the bucket policy, obviously there is nothing there now to prevent you from deleting the bucket. So there's no bucket policy. So you can go back to your bucket and delete your bucket. Select your bucket and delete your bucket. And now you can paste your bucket name. You'll have to copy your entire bucket name, whatever they have given. That is along with your 12-digit account code that they have added. So Elastic Beanstalk under hyphen US hyphen West hyphen 2 hyphen your 12-digit account number. So that becomes unique. And so therefore you can go and delete your bucket now, and your bucket should be deleted. So deleted successfully your particular bucket. And so that completes our overall view into Elastic Beanstalk and what are the resources it creates and how we can deploy in sample application and verify whether it has completed its deployment successfully, and the URL through which we could look at our application. Now, let us continue let us go back to our IAM. So IAM is also an important service. So let's go to IAM and try and look at IAM. So IAM is again a service relating to security. So security is where you need to ensure that not every user has permissions to work with all services of AWS, and there's a right method of authentication. So obviously you need to set up the right mechanisms for giving them the proper use of the resources. So in the dashboard, we have several entities here. We have groups, we have users, we have roles, we have policies, and we have identity providers. So we'll go through each of them to understand what their functionality is. Let us start off with policies. Now in policies, if we click on policies, you will notice there a single policy that we had created for cross-region replication. Observe that when we created a cross-region replication in S3, automatically it has created a policy for us, and it has given us permissions so that bucket in one region can automatically upload or replicate into a different region. Remember, we had two buckets, one in the Oregon region and the other in the Mumbai region. And whatever we uploaded or created in the Oregon region, we tried and observed the effects in the Mumbai region. So for that, permissions had to be given. Otherwise, you cannot simply work with any bucket in any region of any user, you have to set up earlier permissions. Just like we talked about VPC peering, you cannot connect to anybody's VPC and start communicating with their instances, connecting and communicating. So let us first remove this policy. We don't need this policy now. So we will select this policy and then go to actions and delete this policy. And so we need to enter the policy name. So we'll need to create the policy name, copy the policy name, type in and click on delete, and the policy will be deleted. Notice the type it has mentioned here is customer managed. That means that has been created for us. We have used that policy for a specific use case, that is for the cross-region replication. Remove the filter and you will start seeing many policies which are AWS managed. Now these are AWS managed. So there are two types of policies. One is customer managed, one is AWS managed. So you can create a custom policy if you don't find any of the policies here which are matching your requirement. Now, the AWS has studied the different policy types used by many organizations, and they have standardized about 1,105 policies. Now notice here, they have around 1,105 standardized policies that they have created, which are constantly or commonly being used by many organizations. Yet there may be a policy which may not be suitable for you that will appear in this list. In that event, you have an option to create your own custom policy. We will be doing that also. We'll also be creating a custom policy later on when we look at another service called as Lambda. But for now, let us understand what is a policy and how do we set permissions in a policy. Now, the easiest policy that you can look at in this list is an administrator's access policy. So let us look at an administrator's access policy. If you see, search for administrator access. If you're not seeing the administrator access, you have a filter box here. Type in administrator access as a single word, and then you should be able to see your administrator access. Click on this name and you will see the policy in the JSON format. So you will see a policy and go to the JSON format. And go to the JSON format and you will see the policy is just a few lines. Policy is always, all policies are in JSON formats. They start and close with a brace, opening and closing braces. And then you have a version, which is always the first statement in the policy, defining when this policy was created, a date. And then there's a statement block in which you can set up one or more set of permissions. Each block will have three entities: the effect, action, and a resource. So three entities will appear within that statement block. What is an effect? Effect can be one of two factors, either allow or deny. Allow means if you are permitted to work whatever actions are later specified and on the resources that have been included. Deny will automatically prevent you from working on the actions mentioned and on the resources specified. An optional entity is condition. You can also set up a condition indicating when this is effective, when the action and resource will take effect, or when the effect allow or deny will be executed, if the condition turns out to be valid or true. So effect is allow. Action can be any action. A star indicates all actions. So an administrator access has got a basic allow permission. he can probably do any action on any resource because both of these have star star. So what are the actions you're permitted? You're permitted for a get, which is a read, put, which is a write. Then you have post, you have delete, you have update, create, and so on. So actions are many. So you can perform limited actions or all actions. So, or many actions, depending on the responsibility or the role of the particular user. Resource is a service of AWS. So you can specify in the resource section whether he is allowed to work with EC2, VPC, RDS, then DynamoDB, CloudFormation, SNS, and so on. So whatever services we have so far worked with, you can either indicate those names and limit the permissions to only those services, or if you give him a blanket permission like star, automatically he has permissions to work with every service. Now, generally, users should not be given blanket permissions and blanket actions. They should be limited to what they can actually work with. For example, a developer should only be able to allowed to be to work with, say, EC2, VPC, some of RDS. So standard things which they may probably want to work with, Elastic Beanstalk or the cloud formation. Some of these services which can help them set up the backend infrastructure. If they are not familiar with writing a template, then not to provide them with cloud formation. Better to give them only Elastic Beanstalk, where they can just upload the necessary. So S3, Glacier. So there are many things you can indicate within the resources or limit them. So the simplest of all all the policies is an administrative policy, which is simply to allow the user to perform all actions on all resources. There's no limitation. So let us go back to our policies once again and notice there are many other policies here. So there are 1105 as I mentioned. Now let us go into a read-only policy. For example, let us say EC2 read-only. So go into your text box, type in the words EC2 read-only. And there you will notice a policy should appear as Amazon EC2 read-only access. And if you go and verify the JSON for this particular, you will notice what all it does provide you with. There are multiple policies, all mentioned here with different statement blocks. And notice the same three entities appearing in each statement block. Effect is always allow. Action is, there can be different actions. It is describe, describing meaning list. So it only lists the various instances. Allow elastic load balancing. So you can view or list the load balancers. It allows you to look at various monitoring metrics. So describe, list, and get. So you can read, you can view, or you can list. And then you can also look at auto scaling groups, launch configurations, or launch templates. Now, notice here, all of these actions that are mentioned here are basically describe, list, get. That is the set of range of actions that are allowed. There is no put, there is no post, there's no delete, there is no update, there's no create. So anything relating to EC2 instances, you cannot do any other action except only describe, list, and get. So that is purely read only. So only read only. So you can go to the EC2 dashboard, you can look at the instances, you can look at the load balancers, you can look at the auto scaling groups, but you cannot launch instances. You cannot terminate or stop running instances. You cannot delete volumes. You cannot create an elastic IP. You cannot delete a snapshot or create a snapshot. So any of those things in a EC2 dashboard that we have seen, we cannot do other than just read these particular uh, resources or the partial parts of a EC2 dashboard. So this is a policy nature. Remember, a policy is governed by these three entities, a statement block and a version. Next, we go after policies into groups. So what are groups? User groups. Now, rather, let us say if you have 5 individual users or 5 individual developers in your organization. Now, to give permissions, the same permission to the 5 developers. So each developer will have the same EC2 permission. Now, maintaining or managing that kind of a permissions for a large number of users becomes very difficult. If more and more employees get added and more users need to be provided with the EC2 permission, then managing them becomes tedious because some people may resign, some people may be moved to other departments where now they will not work on EC2, and then some people may be terminated, some people, whatever may be the reason, it may happen that you may have to revoke the permissions or add new employees, give them, or some people who get transferred to the IT department need to be provided with the EC2 permission. So all of this managing through an individual at an individual level becomes very problematic. And instead, what we can do is simplify the matter through a group. We can set up a group called, say, developers. And in the developers, we can then allow that entire group to be given a permission called EC2. So whoever becomes a user, whoever becomes a member of that particular group, has automatically the EC2 permission. So if you just want to remove, you just remove it from the group. You don't have to go into individual permissions and then check out. So facilitating group is basically facilitating the easier management of assigning permissions to users. So we set up a user group. So we have, let us say there are 4 administrators in the organization. We set up an administrators group. And under this group, we can then go and set up our users. So let us look at the next part, which is the users. Now users, here we are going to click on our users. So right now we have no users. You may not be seeing any users. So I'm going to remove this user and then let's see. So I have my user removed. So there are no users. Currently, there are no users for me. Similarly, for you also, there should be no user. Let us go and add an user. So first of all, make sure that you have a group called administrators. So let me remove this group also. So I go and delete this group. So right now there are no, so in my dashboard, there are no user groups, there are no users, there are some roles that are already appearing, no policies, no identity providers. So let's go to our user groups and create one user group. And the user group we are going to create, you can call them admins or you can call them administrator, whatever you want to, you can specify a group. Let us say an admins group. We don't have an user for now, so we can't add any user. And we can associate a permission to that particular user group. So the user group is admins, and what policies we want to attach is the administrator access policy. So you just want to give them an administrator access policy. You can give them a read-only access policy, which means any service they can only read They can't create, they can't delete, they can't terminate, they can't stop, they can't start, whatever it is. So I associate an administrator access policy and then go down and click on create a group. That is the only thing that is required, a name for the group and the policies that need to be associated with that group. So I've set up a group name called admins, and now I'm defined the permissions, which is the administrator access for this group. So I have a user group now created, and then I go ahead and create a user for this group, and that users section, I just go ahead and add an user. So this is a user with long-term credentials that is used to interact with AWS in an account. So whenever you want to log into your AWS account, you can use this user's account. So add users. So give your first name. Give your first name, and you click this checkbox where you're saying provide user access to the AWS management console. So when you're providing user access through the console, it should have certain credentials, which is a username and a particular password. So you can say, I want to create a particular IAM user, and the username will be your first name here at the top. Here, username is your particular first name at the top, and you are going to give a custom password. Now, the custom password may probably include certain validations, that is constraints, or rules that it should be accepting to all of these. Maybe I've already set a set of permissions. So before, let me go back to IAM and use the default. There's a custom policy password, so I'll edit it and I'll delete and use the IAM default password policy, which requires 8 characters, upper lowercase numbers and non-alphanumeric characters, and then click on Save Changes. So there is a default password policy under account settings. I go and set up. For you, it will be the default. Otherwise, you can use a custom password if required. So let's go to the users and then again click on add an user. There, select provide, give a username, your first name. Select the checkbox, provide a user, add or create an IAM user, and custom password. Now here you can provide a custom password which should be at least 8 characters long, should include 3 of the following. That is 1 uppercase, 1 lowercase, 1 number, and 1 extra or special character. So any 3 of these will be sufficient. So just go ahead and mention a password. You don't have to create a new password at next sign in. If it's an administrator that you're assigning it for someone else, then you can give this selection. Automatically they will change their password. Otherwise, you can give them a set password for them to work with if you want to. It all depends on the organization's policies, and click on next. And add user to the group is one of the ways you can do. So we have already defined a group, and we can add this user to that group, or you can copy permissions from an entire group or an user. We don't have a user so far, or you can attach directly a permission to the user only without creating the group. So without putting this user in a group, we can directly attach a policy. So these are some of the possibilities for the user. What we're going to do is we are going to make sure that this user is belonging to the admins group. So I'm now creating myself as an admin in AWS, and I go ahead and click on next, and then I go ahead and click on create. And it has says user created successfully. So you can view and download the user's password and email instructions for signing in to the management console. So this is your console URL. You can copy this console URL, and then you have your username, and this is your particular password. Now there is also this is the only time you can view and download the password. So it is always better that you download the CSV file. It will help you to maintain your password into this particular user. So keep this user password that you can work with and return to users list. So you haven't viewed, it will give you a warning message. So if you connect, you cannot retrieve the password in the future. So obviously you should be able to remember your password at all times. Otherwise it is better to download, and if not, you have to start creating a new password for the user. So we have now got our user that has been created in this group. And what we can now do is open up a new tab and paste in that link for the users. And notice now the sign in page will be a slightly different one, which will now indicate that there is an account that you need to provide. An account will appear, account ID will appear, 12 digits, which is your 12-digit account ID. Remember, there's a 12-digit account ID associated. And here I have a name which I've customized. You can also customize that per digits. So you can set up your account 12 digits or account alias, and then you have to specify the credentials that you provided for while creating this name, and then click on sign in. And observe now, when you sign in, your particular sign-in credentials will indicate your name with your account number. Your name with the account number. Now, this is the actual way you should work with AWS if you are working on a daily basis. If you're just working once in a while, you can use the root access. So the one which we were so far working directly with the email and the necessary password was through the root access. That is called as a root user. So now if you go to that other tab, you'll see you will be signed out, because you cannot log in both as a root user and an admin user. Both you cannot use. So you can remove this tab which shows that you were earlier connected to or signed in as a root user. We will not use that. We will continue now to work with the remaining part of this session using a user account. So a user account is more safer to work with, because this does not have the access to the root user's email or the root user's password and certain other privileges. Like an administrator cannot close the account. He cannot possibly set up support plans, different support plans. Then he cannot use the marketplace for selling or buying certain of those, say, let us say instances if you want, or AMIs. All of those cannot be possibly done. So in order to safeguard your credentials as a root user and not get compromised, because as a root user, you have no restrictions You can perform anything and anywhere. You have absolutely no restrictions. You cannot stop them from doing any action on any resource. Anything a root user is allowed to provide. So in the event, if your root user credentials get compromised, then automatically they can get misused. Somebody can log in as you and then launch a lot of instances or probably create many other resources, and then therefore that will add to your billing. Since the credit card is under your name, that bill will be appearing to you, even though the credentials were misused or compromised with someone else. So be careful. If you work with AWS on a regular basis, that is on a daily basis, for example, then AWS advocates. In fact, it is the very way AWS safeguards. It says you should take care not to log in using a root user credentials. Always try to log in using your user account. So create yourself as an administrator and log in as a user account, and then you are better off with protecting your root users' credentials. So now users, so we again go back to our IAM, and in IAM we are looking at, we saw certain things like we saw how to set up our policies, what are policies in fact, then what are user groups, what are users. We are now looking at roles. We created a role today morning, the AWS Elastic Beanstalk EC2 user role. So role is practically 5 different types. It helps you so that one AWS service can permit uh, interacting with other AWS services. So that is one of the use cases. The second use case is if you have multiple accounts of AWS, then obviously, or whether it is belonging to you or whether it is belonging to someone else, if you want to cross connect between these accounts. So cross account access, if you need to provide, then you have to set up a role. So the role will provide you with the cross account access. So you have to give the two accounts IDs, and automatically you will be provided with permissions that you can actually work with both these accounts or cross account access. Web identity is if you want to use this for not creating actually an IAM user, but rather than just providing them with temporary access so that, like, for example, you may have seen on many websites that log in as Facebook, log in as Google, log in with LinkedIn. So these are some of the things where they set up trusted parties. They say that if you already have an account in those respected or respective particular sites, we trust them, and so you do not have to once again create an account in AWS. So temporarily you can use a web identity. Or if you are using an Active Directory or LDAP into your organization, then rather than trying to use a separate AWS login, what you can do is you can federate it with your Active Directory. So using a SAML assertion, that is security assertion markup language. SAML stands for security assertion markup language. So using a SAML notation, what you can do is you can set up a federation where it is a single sign-on. That means you just log in to your particular organization's directory as your regular day-to-day that you come into and log in as your employee. And then that will automatically validate your credentials and give you permissions to work with AWS. So you can set up that kind of a relationship between AWS and your organization through an identity provider. So you can use an identity provider, which will allow you to typically use a SAML identity provider or an OAuth identity provider, and that will typically give you the facility to work with your particular Active Directory or LDAP. For visitors, like for example, if you want, say, auditors, if you want a third-party visitor or an auditor who does not become an employee of the organization, who does not need to be created as an IAM user, which is a long-term required credentials, you can just give them a small temporary permission policy role, that is a custom trust policy role that will help them to perform actions on your account to verify some of the particular transactions, data, whatever they want to view or relate to or audit. They can perform these. So there are multiple types of a role that can be created. We have created one role for the AWS service and using the EC2 instance, or you can use another service called Lambda, or there are many services. If you don't see the service here, then you can select the appropriate service from this drop-down box. As I mentioned, AWS has more than 200 services. So obviously you can select which service you want to interact and create an appropriate role for it to give permissions to work with it. So that comes down to roles. And finally, we have identity providers. So currently we don't have identity providers. There are two types of providers you can select. If you click on add provider, you will see that the two types of providers are, one is a SAML provider, which is basically allowing you to create for your Active Directory Federation service. ADFS, that is through AWS and a SAML identity provider functionality, a trust that you can create, or you can create an open ID, such as Google, Salesforce, LinkedIn, whatever you have, you can create an open ID connect for your web identity federation. So these two types of identity provider can also be set up in IAM for organizations who have requirements based on their setup for working with, whether they want single sign-on using SAML or whether they want to provide OpenID Connect through a third-party application like Salesforce or a Google provider as such. So these are some of the entities of IAM, and IAM is a very important service as considered with only one thing that is also very important to remember is when you go to users, there is a provision for an user. If you go into your users, go to the users option and click on your username. And there you will be seeing that one of the thing is you will have a provision to set up what is called as access keys. So there is called as access keys. So that is currently there are no access key enabled. So access keys is through security credentials. You can go to security credentials tabs, and there you can notice you will have access keys generation. So what is an access key? An access key is basically used for programmatic. Those who typically work with programmatic related, that is only working with developing code, testing, deploying. If you're a programmer, developer, then obviously you will need to have programmatic access. So if you need to work with the CLI, that is the command line interface, or if you need to work with tools like PowerShell, or if you want to work with SDKs, or the API calls that you need to work with. So any of the programmatic related environment tools or resources, excuse me, then you can set up an access key. And what does an access key consist of? An access key consists of two things. One is called, so you have an access key ID and you have a secret access key. So there are two parts, just like a username and a password. You have two items or two parts to the credential for a programmer. One is called as the access key ID and the other is called as the secret access key. The access key ID acts like a username. The secret access key acts like a password. But a programmer cannot log in using these. He cannot use these to log in. To log in to the console, you always require a username and password. So if you need a console access, you need particular username and password. But if you do want to work with your particular programs, that is development, coding, developing, then testing, designing, architecting, any of these things that you work as a developer or a programmer, those things, if you want to work with specific environments, runtime environments and coding and codes and all that, then you will need to have a access key. And the access key has these two credentials, an access key ID or a secret access key. So access key ID, the functionality is basically for people to work with SDKs, APIs, CLIs, and then you may have IDEs or tools such as say PowerShell. So software development kits, application programming interfaces, command line interface, integrated development environment. So any of these things that you work as a programmer and then certain tools that you can utilize. So for all of these interaction, you will need to work with an access key. You cannot directly work with just the console credentials, which is username and password. Username and password is only to interactively work with the console. But for programmatic, so this is console access, this is programmatic access. So programmatically, if you want to access any of these resources, you should have an access key. Access key will give you these two components, an access key ID and a secret access key. If you are not working as a programmer, better not to give an access key, because if this is compromised, again, this can be misused. So ideally, the recommendation is, if not required, not to create. Therefore, they have not created an access key because it may not be required for all users. Whoever is required to create, work with the development environment and so on, can, for them, you can create an appropriate access key, which will create the necessary access key ID and the secret access key. So please be aware, and you cannot log in using an access key ID or a secret access key into AWS console. Console always is through username, password, and then through programmatic access, you can use these particular access key mechanisms. And that is where you get this access keys. So you have, as a best practice, avoid using long-term credentials like access keys. Instead, use tools which provide short-term credentials. So we have short-term things like we can have what is called as STS, signing certificate, or we may have certain credentials for security temporary service. There is a security temporary service called as STS, which gives you for a 24 hours or less than 24 hours access to AWS. So using such temporary keys, you can work with AWS, and then once you're done with that time period, automatically they expire and you have no longer access to your particular console. So the access keys are not enabled by default. You have to set up multi-factor authentication, which is the second form of authentication, which helps in building up security, or this thing for your second level of security for your accounts. So whether it's a user account, whether it's a administrator root user account. So always try and have a multi-factor authentication setup. And multi-factor authentication can be done with software codes through an application that you can install through Play Store in Google, or you can have a hardware device, and then you can link it with your account, and then you can probably get your OTPs and so on, so that you can then punch in those values whenever you want and get authenticated securely. So 2 times authentication generally advised is you should have multi-factor authentication set up for every account in AWS. So that is how you work with identity and access management. Now, a couple of things I just wanted to clarify before we things may have forgotten in VPC. In VPC, if you remember, we had this VPC that was set up and a corporate data center. And then we said we could link the two. We could link the two using certain gateways. So we had 2 gateways here. Anybody remembers what gateways were used?
Internet gateway.
Not internet gateway. When you are connecting to your corporate data center, you are not using your internet gateway.
Customer gateway.
Customer gateway. And the other gateway?
Internet gateway.
Not internet gateway.
VPG.
We have a customer. Yeah, what is VPG?
Virtual private gateway.
Yeah, virtual private gateway. So we had a virtual private gateway and we had a customer gateway from the 2 locations. One is your VPC, the other is your corporate data center, and we could connect using what? What was this connectivity through? Anybody remembers the architecture of a VPC? How did we connect the two?
Internet.
Through the internet, but there is a separate direct, a connectivity between the two. How could we connect between your corporate data center and your VPC in the cloud, AWS cloud? There were 2 gateways you needed to have, and then the 2 gateways were associated or connected using VPN connection, virtual private network connection. Have you worked with VPNs? A VPN is a virtual private network where remotely, if you're at home and you can log into your office network, obviously that is through using your VPN connection. And a VPN connection usually goes over the internet. So when a VPN connection is over the internet, obviously, based on the internet's performance, apparently your workload's performance will be dependent on. Now, sometimes it may be required that there is a lot of data that needs to be constantly transferred, or you need to communicate with a standard bandwidth. You don't want it to be fluctuating based on the internet dependency. So there is a service which is also available, which is called as a direct connect service. So you can connect a particular. So you have another service which is called as a direct connect. A direct connect is a leased line. So So direct connect service is a lease line and it is not over the internet. It is basically, so you have a direct connect service, which is also very effective in giving you stabilized performance because here the internet is not involved. It does not use the internet. It uses a direct connectivity, a leased line between your corporate data center and the VPC. So you're assured of performance, high level of performance with you will be having a standard bandwidth. It will not fluctuate depending on the performance of the internet. So there will be no fluctuations, no uh, slowness or any kind of a disturbances, congestion of the internet will not affect it and so on. So if certain organizations who may want to work with standard bandwidth and definite performance or good performance levels can make use of a direct connect service. Now, this direct connect service cannot be done instantly. Uh, as engineers from AWS will come to your organization, locate which is the nearest direct connect location they have, and then they will set up an automatic lease line between that uh, router that is in your organization or in the customer gateway, a router they will set up, and then they will link it with the virtual private gateway within your VPC. So it will take about 15 days for a direct connect service to be set up. There is a process that you need to follow. You have to set up an agreement, agree to all those terms, and then they come and make sure they can be able to work with this direct connect service. But it is very effective in the case of regular communication between the particular data center and your particular VPC. So if you have uh, applications which are in the corporate data center and the databases in the cloud, or you have applications in the cloud and databases in the data center. So if you need them to interact regularly on a high level of performance, then apparently you can set it up with direct connect. So that is the service you need to work with. So please be aware of this additional service that is available called Direct Connect, in addition to VPN connection. Now, VPN connection is over the internet and depends on the performance or the congestion and the other issues that internets can normally be facing. So automatically your performance will matter or depend upon those factors. Now in EC2, one more thing I just wanted to go through is how to what are the different pricing options in EC2. So one of the things we have always worked with is an on-demand EC2 instance type. That is, whenever we wanted to create an instance, we were able to go to the EC2 dashboard and launch an instance. But an on-demand instance is not the most effective. So there are other types of instances as well. So one of the other types of instances is called as reserved, and you have a scheduled, you have a spot, and you have a dedicated host. So there are pricing options for EC2 instances. Uh, on demand is directly not definitely the right option that you need to work with because that is not the most cost effective or the cheapest of the options. So if you go instead of a on demand, you go for a reserved instance, you will be able to save around 75%. So 75% is what you will be able to have cost savings if you use a reserved instance. Now, when can you use a reserved instance? A reserved instance is basically you set up, in fact, you purchase. It is outright, you can set up a reserved instance if you want to work with it for a long term. So let us say you are going to use AWS for the future, and now at least for 1 year, you need at least 5 instances continuously running all the time in your production environment. So what you can do is you can use 5 reserved instances. So reserved instances for those 5 instances running for almost 1 year. So or at least 1 year. So you have terms of 1 year or 3 years. So it is defined by terms. You can select which term you want to use. So 1 year or 3 years. And you will be, if you are purchasing that particular instance for that entire period, so 1 year, then automatically you will be saving more than 75% of actual cost of an on-demand instance. So the other thing is you also have certain payment flexibilities. So when you want to pay for these instances, so what you can do is you can possibly use either all upfront, which gives you the maximum discount, or you can give partial upfront. You can pay part of the entire payment, or you can use the no upfront. So depending on your selection of your payment options, automatically your cost savings percentage will vary. So it can vary from 60 to 75%. So you may, depending on how you set up your, so you may have uh, 3 years. If you say you select a 3 years period and then you select all upfront, this will give you the maximum savings. If you use 3 years partial upfront, you may get around 72%. If you use 3 years no upfront, then you may get 69%. If you use 1 year all upfront, you may get 65%. If you use partial upfront, you may get 62%. If you get 1 year no upfront, you may get 60%. So it all depends what term and what payment option you utilize for your savings. So depending on this combination, you will be able to save that much from based on your on-demand cost. So, but this has to be purchased for a period of at least 1 year or 3 years. That is up to you. Now, whether you use it for 1 year or 3 years, it doesn't matter to AWS because you're paying for the entire period. So whether you use it once a 1 hour a day or you don't use it for 6 months, it is your loss. So apparently, if you are not going to use a instance regularly, then there is no point in using a reserved instance. If you're going to use it regularly for a period of 1 year or 3 years, and then you can select one of these payment options, obviously you will be able to do a bit of cost savings. Now, a scheduled is also on a similar lines. There is, of course, uh, no payment options, but you can get up to 65% savings. And here again, you have to purchase it for 1 year or 3 years. But here now you can choose between uh, how many hours you want to run that particular. Say if you want to run for 4 hours only scheduled, I schedule it. Say for 4 hours on, I can use it on either a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis. So daily basis meaning I can say from say 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. So I can say just this time duration, 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. So I can set up for 4 hours, 4 hours that is 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. I may want it on a daily basis. If I select weekly, I can specify which days of the week. I can say Monday, for example, I can say here, let me just go. I can weekly means I specify whether it is Monday, whether it is, so here in weekly, I can specify whether it is Monday, Wednesday or Friday. So 3 days in the week, or monthly, I can specify the days. Day number 1, day number 10, day number 15, day number 25, day number 30. So either I can specify the day number using a monthly option. Using a weekly option, I can specify the day of the week, or using a daily, I specify the hours. Even if I specify weekly or monthly, I have to specify the hours on those days. So if I select day weekly and I select Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then on those days, how many hours I want to run, and those hours will be fixed. 4 hours, 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. So 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. I will be allotted a scheduled instance, and I will be able to work with it. Again, this has to be for a period of at least 1 to 3 years, and you will have a savings generally of 65%. Now, the last one, second last one is we have a spot instance. A spot instance can vary between 15 to 20%, or rather you have 85 to 90% savings. Means it will only cost you 10% of what any on-demand costs. So the best type of instance that you can work with is a spot instance. But spot instances are not available at all times. So this is not available at all times. So when is it available? It is available in the times when there are off-peak periods. So generally, let us say in Mumbai region, what happens in Mumbai region, many of the customers belong to the India region. So India works in a certain time zone, the Indian standard time zone. Now in the offices in India, they work normally between 8 a.m., let us say, to around 8 p.m. as a work day. Anything between these periods, we may say it's an ideal work day. And now some offices may work till 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, 9, 10 even also. But we'll consider an average work day between 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Now this is a peak period is what we defined. Anything beyond this time is an off-peak period, especially on Sundays and Saturdays, which are normally holidays for many of the industries, companies, organizations, government organizations, and so on. So during those times, what happens? AWS servers are typically idle. There is no load. There is no usage of their resources. So at that time, what they say is, we will give you the instances, same instances, but at a very reduced price. So if you go for an EC2 instance during this period, that is, you will get almost 90% savings. So you have an on-demand type, from which you can get 90% if you rather use a spot instance. But these are, as I said, not available at all times. In times during, so not available in times during peak hours. And then secondly, the limitation is if your instance, which is a spot instance, it is like a auction bidding. You can bid for the instance price, just like you can bid in certain other industries also, like an auction. You can specify how much you are ready to pay for that instance. If AWS agrees to that price, they will give you that instance and you can work with it. So even with 10%, whatever you may have bid, automatically they will be giving you an instance and you can continue to work with it. But in the event there's a demand that is required by AWS, people start coming in and start utilizing instances, and then your instance becomes the cheapest, and therefore they cannot afford to you give it for your cheapest price because there are other users who are ready to pay a higher price, then obviously your instance will be terminated with a period with 2 minutes warning. So you will be given a 2 minutes warning, and AWS will automatically terminate your particular instance. Now, this is a drawback of a spot instance. So it is not guaranteed that your spot instance may be running all time whenever you want to work with your applications or your workloads. In such an event, what happens is you have 2 minutes to take any backups or anything of your data and continue to make sure that your data will be available for the next instance that you create. But instance may not survive for more than, I mean, it will be terminated the moment AWS wants to reclaim it back because of higher demand. And so if you have critical workloads or very important things that need to be processed, obviously they are not suitable through using spot instances, because spot instances can get terminated at any time with just a simple 2 minute warning. But they offer you the highest. So if there's some kind of a jobs that can be redone or anytime later, so like for example, a batch job, you're taking a what do we say? We were taking a backup of your database. Now that backup does not get completed in your regular time period, and so your instance gets terminated. And so it's okay. After some time, you can retry with another instance, and your backup may get succeeded. So backup can always be taken at different times. Obviously, it is not that it has to be completed at one particular time critically. So backups can, therefore, if they can be reprocessed later, obviously you can use a spot instance in such a case. Finally, you have a dedicated host, the most expensive. Here, it is the most expensive of all. In fact, there are no cost savings. You have to actually pay much higher than the on-demand instance, but this is not suitable for all organizations. Very useful is for very useful for certain types of industries like pharmaceutical, military, defense, and so on. So what happens is in a pharmaceutical type of an industry, when they're doing research and development on drugs, now they are releasing patents, they have formulas, they have different secrets that they do not want to be shared with other customers using a shared mechanism, resource pooling, or on a standard type of virtualized kind of an environment. So here they use a dedicated host. Dedicated host means a single server is totally provided to them with the operating system, whatever desired operating system and the necessary storage, network, and so on. And they work with it and they're automatically charged with it. Now, this is a necessity. This is as per law that a pharmaceutical company should automatically always work with a dedicated host, because they cannot share in with other companies. Similarly, military defense has to have confidential, sensitive kind of information, and therefore they will. 5 minutes. So in military defense also, they don't require, they require very sensitized information to be secure. So that should not be revealed or shared with anybody else, and therefore they may opt for a dedicated host. And such a very selective industries may work with such kind of a pricing option, because those are the most expensive and do not help in your cost savings. But normally, if you do want to use cost savings, you can use either from reserved, scheduled, or spot. If you want to do it randomly at any time, obviously you have the on-demand option, and you can then work with it. Now, for example, when you use auto scaling is whenever the demand increases, your number of instances increase. Now, that time you cannot use a reserved or a scheduled or a spot. Obviously, you have to use an on-demand instance, because that will be at that instance, the instance will be created and automatic. But then you can possibly select a spot if it is available. There is a provision that you may select a spot, but the spot instance can get terminated. If it gets terminated, a new instance will be created. So that is how it will continue to function. You have an option for this. So remember these things, that when you work with EC2 instances, even RDS instances, there are certain types that are supported. So you have the on-demand and the reserved especially, where you get savings if you go in for periods of 1 year or 3 years, and then use the payment options for your discount capabilities. Remember, all upfront, the maximum period gives you the maximum savings, and the lowest period with the no upfront option will give you the least savings. And between the two, whatever is the combination, will get the appropriate range of savings that you can utilize. Okay, so I hope the VPC Direct Connect and the pricing options of EC2, IAM, and the Elastic Beanstalk, whatever we have covered so far, all of these are clear to you. And at this point, we will stop for a break. We'll take a break for 15 minutes. So it is around 11:43, so 45. So 11:45, let us consider, and 12 o'clock we shall reassemble and then continue the session. Maybe one more 10 minutes break I can give later on around 1 o'clock, so that we can be refreshed for the remaining last hour. So I hope these concepts are clear, guys. Any questions so far? Anybody who has a question on any of these options?
No.
Okay, I'll see you. Yeah, anybody? Okay, I'll see you. Yeah,
Hi,
sure.
Stakar. Where can we see all those instances in the dashboard, like the spot and the scheduled, all those?
So you can go into your EC2 dashboard. So go into your EC2 dashboard. And in your EC2 dashboard, you have reserved instances. You have this dedicated hosts. You have scheduled instances. You have spot requests.
Okay, got it.
So these are the different types that you can utilize. Fine. So let's take a break for 15 minutes, and 12 o'clock we'll reassemble. So thanks, guys. I'll see you at 12. Okay, welcome back, guys, and we'll continue with the remaining services. So let's log into our console. Notice you will be automatically redirected to log in through your user account. You may either notice your account ID appear, or if you don't find your account ID, you'll have to log in using a root user email. So notice at the bottom, there is a link to log in as a root user email. Take your account ID and then use that to go to your, paste this into your IM users link. But you should ideally log in using a user account, not as a root user. Notice you should be having this notation at the top. Your first name or your username along with your 12-digit account ID. Now, one of the services we had already seen in one of the EC2 related labs was CloudWatch. CloudWatch is a service where we set up alarms, if you remember, while setting up scaling policies for increasing or decreasing our number of instances as the demand grows. We wanted to use alarms, and the alarms was typically monitoring a metric called CPU utilization. So we had set up auto scaling groups, and then we were trying to monitor the CPU utilization metric of our instances. And through the CloudWatch alarm, it triggered whenever the threshold was reached, and an action was taken either to remove or add an instance as per the appropriate policy. So
Hi,
CloudWatch,
Sudhakar. Yes,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you.
yeah.
So, where can I find the account ID by logging into the AWS console?
So under your name, you'll have your account ID.
Okay.
You see your account ID?
You mean the user?
Pardon?
Okay. Okay, got it.
Yeah, account your name, you'll see your account ID, 12-digit account ID. Okay, so we are looking at CloudWatch service, and in CloudWatch we are in the left-hand side panel. Now, some of the things we are looking at, we have seen how alarms were created, or we had set up alarms when working with scaling policies. We can also look up logs and metrics. We know the different metrics like CPU utilization, network in, network out, disk reads in, disk writes out. So one of the things we are going to look at is events. How events can be triggered and notifications sent through CloudWatch. So here, let us look at events. So expand the events, and I think I have already sent you a document. The document is CloudWatch Labs or Lambda CloudWatch Labs. There's a Lambda CloudWatch Labs, if I remember. I may have sent you this document today morning. So here the third lab, if you go to lab number 3, you will see that there is using log state changes of Amazon EC2 instances using CloudWatch events. So for this, what we need to do is we need to first set up an instance. So let us see. Okay, so let us go to the navigation pane, choose events, and then create a rule. And so I've given you the steps here if you would like to go ahead and set up these rules. Otherwise, you can follow me. In the events, you click on rules. You have rules here. So we are going to set up a rule. And what it actually does is when you click on rules, it actually takes you, redirects to a new service called Amazon Event Bridge. Right now, CloudWatch is being migrated to this new service. Until this service is finalized in all manners, CloudWatch will continue to appear. Once Event Bridge is fully set up, then they may deprecate or remove CloudWatch. So right now, we will continue to use only CloudWatch events. So here there's a link. You will see back to CloudWatch events rules page. So we will not use the rules in Event Bridge. We will go and use the CloudWatch events rules page. So click on that backlink and then you should see the rules here. Let me remove this rule. So here we are going to go ahead and we are going to set up a rule which will be processed for certain targets. So you can create, edit, and delete rules according to your requirement. So click on create a rule and you can set up a pattern, either a pattern or a schedule at a particular time to invoke certain targets. So what is the service you want to build your rule for? The source, event source is an EC2 event. So scroll down to where you can come down to EC2. It is alphabetically arranged. So you can notice that EC2, you should be able to scroll down. And then you can specify which event type. So event type, there are multiple events. So whenever there is a volume notification, an AMI state change, or there is a multi-volume or a snapshot notification. So there are different events, spot instance, interruption. So any of these things that you want to set up, you can use it for your events. So here we are going to use an instance state change notification. Instance state change notification is if my instance changes the state from, say, let us say from running to stopped to terminated, started, or pending, whatever, whenever the instance state changes, then I want it kind of a notification in a log group into logs, into my logs here, into my logs is what I want to set up. So I'm saying EC2 instance state change notification, and it is any state. I'm not particular about a particular state and any instance. So whatever instance, we don't have any instance. So it is basically an instance state change notification. And then on the right hand side, we are going to add a target. So we'll click on the target. And where do we want to set up this notification? We want to use it in our SNS topic. Rather, we will use it for CloudWatch logs. We will use it for a CloudWatch log group. We can use it for SNS, but we removed the topic, if you remember, from SNS. So right now we don't have a topic there. So again, we have to go topic, subscribe, and all that. So instead, we'll go to a CloudWatch log group. That is, this is the log groups. So if we expand this, you will see log groups. So we are going to go into setting up this event notification in a log group. And there I'm going to say CloudWatch AWS events slash, and then I leave it. I don't give anything here. So I use a CloudWatch log groups and then click on add target. I don't have to add target because this is what I just want to go through a CloudWatch log group, and it should go to a particular AWS events, particular group in my log groups. So let me check in log groups, AWS events. Do I have a log group already? So there are no log groups. So my events, actually, I lost all of that. So I have to go and do the whole thing again. EC2. Then all events, instance state, and then add a target, cloud watch, group. And then that is all I need to set up. And then I go into configure defaults. So I need to add something here, I think. Instances. So add instances word into this log group, instances, and then go click on configure details. So now you have to give a name for your rule. So give EC2 state change rule. And then state is enabled, click on create a rule. Details, so no spaces allowed. It says error because I've given a space between the, so no spaces allowed, create a rule. And success, rule EC2 state rule, state change rule was created. So I've set up a rule now which will detect anything when my EC2 instances will change its state, and automatically it will go and create an event group in log groups. And then it will, so it has created a log group now called AWS events instances. And if I go into this, there are no log streams. So there are no log streams now. There is nothing within my log group. In my log group, I can look at each of the logs through log streams. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate this particular and then go into EC2 dashboard and launch an instance. So go and launch an instance. Simple instance I need to launch. So I can just say EC2 instance. And then I select standard AMI2. And then I keep the T2.micro key pair. I don't have to use a key pair. Proceed without a key pair. Network and all. No, nothing. Select an existing security group, which is WebSG. And then nothing else I need to do. No bash script and nothing else. So I go and launch an instance. Now my instance is currently in the pending state. So there is a new state that has been generated. So if I go to my Cloud Watch Management Console and refresh, I will see one particular log stream being created, which is the pending state. Notice here, if I expand this, I will see the state here below as pending. Notice here the state has gone to pending. But now I may have seen that the instance may already be running also. So it is already running. So it has changed state from pending to running. So I'll remove this. So if I now go into my log streams and refresh, I should see one more event, which is the
Sudhakar, your screen is not visible for you.
is not visible. Why? I have not
I
shared.
don't. I think yeah.
Okay.
Now it's
So I can just refresh. So there was only one event, which was the pending state. And then there was
Circle, it's inside sector.
yeah, now there is two events. So notice there, the second event has occurred, which is the running state. So if you go into the second link and expand the log stream, you will now see the state as running. So there are two events that we have seen. One is for the particular pending and one is for the particular running state. Now let me go to my instances, select my instance, go to the instance state and stop the instance. Now when I'm stopping the instance, so it will say stopping. So state has changed from running to stopping. So automatically there's a third event which should automatically get logged in. And now if I notice there's a third event that has come up, and that is the latest event. So I'll click the topmost link and expand this. And if I now go and check out the state is stopping. The state is stopping. So the third event that has come up is my stopping. And now if I go and check my instance, it is already in the stopped state. So when it is in the stopped state, there's a fourth event. There's a fourth event that has happened. If I go and click on the link and expand, it will show me the state as stopped. So the fourth event as a stopped instance. Now, if I go ahead and verify this instances, there are 4 events so far. And if I go to my instances and terminate this instance now, so it will first say shutting down. So it will say shutting down. Shutting down is one more instance change. And then once it goes into shutting down and then terminated. So there are 2 changes now. First it was stopped, shutting down and terminated. I should see 6 events altogether. So if I go and refresh, I should see 6 events altogether. So I have 6 events. The topmost will reflect my terminated, which was the last event it performed. That was the terminated. And then if I go back and check my second last, it should be shutting down. So if I go and check out my second here in the log stream, the state would have been mentioned as shutting down. So if you have observed that in the case of your events, whatever you set up as a rule will automatically set up all the necessary notifications through a log stream in your particular log group that you define as your target. So you can then verify at each particular time period. So we started at 12:13 and ended at 12:17 in a period of 4 minutes. We did 6 events. We did a pending, we launched, we stopped, we started and so on. And then we were able to verify all of these log streams. So here were the logs we could look at the details about each of these entries, so you can verify if something goes wrong, what is the problem through a log file. So logs, events, metrics, of course, we have seen are the different metrics, CPU utilization and alarms. So these are some of the major things that you can utilize using a CloudWatch service, a very important service in AWS, basically ideal for monitoring for your logging and alarms or your events notification purposes. So that is a major service called CloudWatch. Now, besides CloudWatch, there is another service called as CloudTrail. So if you go into the CloudTrail service, this service is more for auditing, though it is a logging service. It continuously logs your AWS account activity, but it is also meant to meet your governance, compliance, and auditing needs for your AWS accounts. So whenever there's an audit, whenever there is your external or internal audits and people who want to come and check your accounts and compliance, regulatory, so obviously they can go into CloudTrail. CloudTrail maintains a history of, now for example, when what user did, what action was done, when was it done, who has done it. So all of these things. So for example, let us say 3 days back, somebody deleted a bucket in S3. Then obviously now you don't know who deleted it. So how do you track? How do you audit? How do you verify? How do you diagnose? So then you can go into CloudTrail. So somebody deleted a bucket, somebody terminated an instance, somebody uploaded a new bucket or a new object, somebody created a new bucket, something of that kind. Anything, any event that has happened, any API call that is made, it is logged into CloudTrail. So in CloudTrail, you can go and verify the particular sequence of events that will be based on a chronological order, that is as per the time, and therefore you can then verify the actions that were performed. Just to give you an idea how CloudTrail looks, on your left-hand side, please click on those 3 dashes. You will see an event history. You can see there's an event history. So click on the event history and it will show you the last 50 events that has been now generated. So right now what we last did was we created log stream. So we saw log stream, we terminated an instance, who terminated the instance, the username will come here, the event and time will come here, the source will come here, the resource type will come here. So all of these details will the instance, that is the instance ID, will also be shown here. So all of these you will be able to gather. So in the instance history, notice we created log stream, then we ran instances, then we created a log group, and we put in a rule, we put in a resource policy, we put in a targets, and then we removed the targets, deleted a bucket, deleted the bucket policy, deleted a security group, released the EPI address, so deleted launch template, deleted auto scaling group. So all of these actions were performed while we did that elastic beanstalk. Some of these got automatically performed by the as a root user, but now we are launching, we went through IAM, so it is shown through the user called Sudhakar. So Sudhakar is the user I have created as the username. So notice now everything comes as a root user or as a root user. So it will show you these basic things. So in the EC2 instance, auto scaling, elastic IP. So all of these resource services, wherever that service has taken place, all that thing will be indicated. So notice here, all of these things, cloud formation. Yesterday we did cloud formation. So today cloud formation was used for the particular set of instances that were created. Remember in Elastic Beanstalk, the entire environment was created using a template of cloud formation behind the screens. On particular Friday, we did other things. We did a cloud formation. We did through setting up EC2. So cloud formation, we created a bucket. We did creating an environment which is Elastic Beanstalk. So all of these were indicated on those particular dates. So you can notice here the history that you can look through and verify when what event happened, who performed that event, and what was the resource type and so on. So details about how you can check out for auditing purposes can be done using a CloudTrail. So any action you perform in AWS is resulting in an API call. Whenever you interact with AWS, it is basically an API call. That API call gets logged into CloudTrail. So remember, CloudTrail is an important service for both your logging purposes. It logs as well as maintains a history for all of your basic diagnosis, auditing, regulatory compliance, or for your governance purposes. Then we look at another service called as Trusted Advisor. We look at a service called as Trusted Advisor. And this Trusted Advisor basically is used to give you recommendations of 5 different parameters. And what are those 5 different parameters? Cost optimization, performance, security, fault tolerance, and service limits. So 5 of these things, it does keep on checking your system and verifies what are necessary things that you can possibly work with. So one of the things is, it says one action is recommended in the security group, and the particular thing that it has mentioned as the recommended action is there is specific ports unrestricted, which means there are certain ports which allow complete access, that is unrestricted access to all ports, which is to the internet we are referring to. And so it is saying these particular restrictions are not applied. And so you should apply these restrictions to these ports. They're unrestricted currently and therefore exposed to the public access. And that's what they're specifying. Investigation recommended for one security event, and the investigation, what they're saying is the triangle where they're saying S3 bucket permissions. It says one of 2 buckets have permissions properties that grant global access. That means, again, public access is given to this S3 bucket. We have 2 buckets, it says, and out of these 2 buckets, 1 bucket is not allowed. So obviously you should make sure that you do not give public access. So they're giving a warning so that unnecessarily nobody misuses that bucket. Now, in your particular free tier account, you have only limited recommendations that you can look at. One is security and the other is service limits. So you can check for your service limits and how many service limits you're probably using. If it's a green tick mark, that means you are within the service limits that you're using. If it is a circle with a red mark, then it is error. Otherwise, it's a warning. A triangle with a orange mark is a warning. Other things, it will tell you that you have to upgrade your support plan to make sure that you get all trusted advisor checks. Now, what it is doing here in the particular recommendations is it's only mentioning what is not properly set up in your system. It will not correct it. It will not auto correct the necessary errors or warnings or checks. What it is saying is you have to do it. I'm only pointing out what should be done. So it is only a recommendation. It says these are not optimal. These are not perfect for your account currently. So definitely you should take action. Now, whether you want to take action or not is up to you. So this is an advisor. It only advises. It is a free advisor. So just like how many people simply give free advice. So it is also saying I'm giving you advice, but this is valuable advice. It's not a worthless advice. It's a valuable advice. It's saying we are giving you advice and you should take precautions to make sure you follow these advices. But now it is up to you whether you want to go and do the appropriate implementations, corrections. That is left to you. So trusted advisor is a recommendation service. Then we come to a service called as Lambda, one of the major services for serverless computing. Now, Lambda is called as a serverless computing, meaning there are no servers involved. So Lambda is a function. Lambda is basically a service which is also referred to as serverless computing, or sometimes event-driven programming. So what is happening is in this particular type of a service, you do not focus on infrastructure. That is the backend. You don't have to focus on infrastructure. Your focus should be only on writing code through functions. You should be only writing code using functions, and the functions can be in any language, like the popular languages it supports. AWS supports Java, .NET, Node.js, Python, and so on. So we have seen many of those already. So the different programming languages, popular programming languages it supports, you can write code through functions. And whenever an event happens, that event will trigger this function. And behind the scenes, AWS will go and set up the necessary infrastructure. So for a developer, he does not have to worry about what is the number of instances he has to create, what is the type of load balancer he has to use, how many minimum and maximum size he should set up in the auto scaling group, whether he needs a load balancer, whether he needs an RDS instance, whether he needs a security group, whether it's a bucket. So all of these things he did not worry. What he has to do is just do and write a function. The system will determine what are the resources required to be created, and it will automatically go and launch those particular resources. So that is a simple written function-based programming or serverless computing, event-driven programming is what Lambda is referred to. EC2 is a server-based computing. That is, it creates servers, EC2 and other services like ECS, which creates containers. So containers are like virtual machines. EC2 are virtual machines, but containers are similar to EC2 virtual machines, slightly different in the way the virtualization works. But again, they are server based. Here, Lambda is serverless. We don't create any resources in the infrastructure. We just go and write code through functions. So one of the things we can quickly try and look at is how to write a Lambda lab. And I've sent you a document called copy S3 objects. So if you go and refer to that particular, so if you go and refer to that copy S3 objects code, S3 copy objects. So there we have some code. So again, you need to have two buckets in S3. So just go ahead and create another bucket. If you don't have two buckets, you need to go and create a new bucket in your S3 service. So let me check my S3. I have already got two buckets there. So make sure you also create a new bucket. Make sure you remove the ACL permissions. So, okay, let me go and create a new bucket. I'll show you. Create a bucket my bucket SN2 in the same Oregon region, and then I will go ahead object. I will enable ACLs, and then I will remove the block public access, and then I acknowledge this. I enable versioning because it's free anyway, and then I go ahead and click on disable the bucket key and create a bucket. And it will not allow me because there is a bucket name already there. So I'll say bucket name S4, and then I'll go and create. And it is created my bucket SN4. So I have two buckets now, SN1 and SN4 in the same region. So two bucket names, my bucket SN1, SN4. So I've set up my two buckets. Again, you please set up the same types, enable ACLs and remove the public block access, and then go and create a bucket. The next step is we need to go ahead and create a new policy. So let's go ahead into IAM, and in IAM, we will not be requiring an instance. So we'll go and terminate this instance, guys. The one that we created for our CloudWatch. We'll go and terminate the instance. So the instance has been terminated. I can now go into IAM. And in IAM, I will be able to go and create a new policy. So I'm going to go ahead into policies. And I will create a new policy. So go into policies, create a policy. And there I'm going to select a service, which service I'm going to work with, and that is my Lambda service. I'm going to use a Lambda service. And for my Lambda service, what am I going to use is I'm going to go into a JSON. And in the JSON, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and set up my policy here. It's the same policy that will allow me permissions to access my buckets. So my Lambda function will allow me my access. So I'll remove whatever is there in this policy editor. So through my JSON tab, I can go and copy my policy, which is through the file that I sent to you, S3 copy objects, and change the bucket name. So here I had changed the origin bucket is SN1, where I'm reading an object, and then I'm going to put an object in SN4 in my other bucket. So I'm going to go and do two actions through my policies, allow permissions to read an object from this bucket and put an object into this bucket. So I have two buckets. I change the names of my buckets, and then I go and click on next and give it a name. So I'll say my Lambda S3 policy. My Lambda S3 policy. So I'll give it a name and then click on create policy. Valid characters. My Lambda S3 policy and then create a policy. So policy, my Lambda S3 policy has been created. Now to use this policy, I need to create a role just to make sure that the role is set up. So I have to go into roles and then create a role. And the AWS service I will be using is Lambda. Use case is Lambda service. And I'm going to use this policy that I just defined, which is my Lambda S3 policy. So I use my policy and click on role, give it a name, my Lambda S3 role, Lambda S3 role, and then I go ahead and click on create a role. So two things I've set up. I've created a role and I've created my policy, custom roles and custom policies. And now I go into my Lambda function. So I go into my Lambda service, and in the Lambda service, what I need to do is it lets you run code without thinking about servers. So this is only the function it does. It only allows you to run without you to think about the necessary backend. So let's go ahead and create a function. Notice here at the bottom, it supports all of these different types: .NET, Go, Java, Node.js, Python, Ruby, and so on. So let's create a function and we'll author from scratch. Give it a function called my lambda function. And what I'm going to use is a node, an earlier version of node. So node 16.x, node.js 16.x. I'll use not the current node 18. I'll use a node 16.s and then change the default execution role. So I've created a new role, which is the my lambda S3 role. So use an existing role, and in the role, I will select my lambda S3 role. So in permissions, I'll go to change default execution role, use an existing role, and select my drop-down box and use my lambda S3 role, and then click on create a function. So I've set up a function with my particular role, and now I need to give the code to my function. So I set up a function. I go into my code source. This is my code source where I will go and add the code. I find there is some code already there, which is in my index.js, node.js. So I just go and remove this and instead copy the code from my particular file from the word var. I don't use the word lambda function till the end. I copy this entire code and paste it within this index.js. In the index.js document, I paste all of this code. And notice here, I have to give two names. One is the source bucket name and one is my destination bucket name. So my bucket SN1. I copy this name and in the destination, I say my bucket SN4. It is wrong here.
Sudhakar Babu here.
Yeah.
So, okay, I thought of saying like row number 7 is missing like earlier, like object key.
Ah. Yeah. So now SN4, SN1. So therefore now, obviously everything is in order. There are no errors that are indicated. So I've changed the bucket names, bucket SN1 and bucket SN4. What it is simply doing is, it is a Lambda function which is just doing a copy source from the source to destination. It is just copying the object, whatever we are defining, whatever we are uploading into the source, we are uploading an object, and that will be copied from the source bucket to the destination bucket. So that is what is the function purpose. So we have identified my two buckets. The source is SN1, SN4 is my destination bucket. I click on changes not deployed. So I click on deploy and it will say changes deployed. So I have clicked on change deploy, and then it would have said changes would have been successfully updated the function, my Lambda function. Okay, perfect. Now the last part is I need to set up a trigger for my Lambda function. That is, when should this Lambda function execute? It should execute whenever I set up an event, and that event is through a trigger. And that trigger, I will select a source. My source should be an S3 bucket, and I select S3. So I select S3, I select my source bucket, SN1. The event type is a put. That means I'm uploading an object. I'm uploading an object into my particular event, and then I'm not using and I'm making sure it's not a recursive function. That is, I'm not using the same bucket for input and output, as this will go into a recursive loop, which will only increase my usage and costs. So automatically, I'm not using that. I'm using two different buckets. One is my source bucket and the other is my destination bucket. So this is my source bucket. I'm using a trigger to my source bucket, and the event is a put. And I go ahead and click on add. And in my code, I've already mentioned the destination bucket, which is SN4. So I've added a trigger to my S3 events. And then now I'm going to go ahead and perform an upload into S3. And once I performed an upload function event into S3, it will trigger my Lambda function, which will copy that object from my source bucket to my destination bucket. So I go into my SN1. I have some objects already there. I may want to delete some of these objects. So just type delete and then click on delete objects, and then successfully deleted the objects. So in my source, I have an index.html, but I'm now going to copy same S3 copy objects into my source bucket, and then let us see whether it gets. Right now in my second bucket, bucket SN4, there are no objects. So if I go and verify my second bucket, in bucket SN4, there are currently no objects. So I go into buckets, go to my bucket SN1, and then upload my copy S3 objects, add files, and go to my script files. Wherever I've stored my S3 copy objects, and then open that, give it permissions, which is public access. Check this box and then go ahead and click on upload. And it is uploading. It has upload succeeded. One file has been set up in my source bucket, which is my S3 copy objects, which is my bucket SN1. So in my source object, I've already got this particular object set up, and it is today's date that it has copied 1249, and I just go and verify in my destination bucket. Sorry, I go and in my destination bucket. Does it go and select this? I go and select my destination bucket and observe now, this is my destination bucket. It has copied my object with the same timestamp 1249, today's date, and the same size and so on. So the Lambda function has been invoked, it has executed, it has performed the action of copying. It is a simple function that it is just copied one object from one bucket to another. But this is how you can notice that if you want to write functions and behind the scenes, AWS will take care of anything that needs to be performed. So it will do the necessary infrastructure. It will go ahead and set up the necessary servers if required, any load balancers, auto scaling groups, security groups, RDS instances, all of those CloudWatch alarms, security, I mean, S3 buckets, all of those things that need to be done. So all of those can be performed. So this is an overview of how you can work with Lambda function. So you can, yeah.
It's not copied in my case.
So
Can I share screen?
yeah.
So I have uploaded in bucket one this abc.txt, but it isn't coming in that SNW4.
Show me your buckets. Both your buckets. Okay. Both your buckets are in Oregon. Both objects can be public. When you upload it, did you give it permission?
Yeah, regarding ABC, I have given permission for public.
And your other bucket has got ACL enabled?
Yes.
Okay. And remove block access, public access?
Remove?
Public access. Block public access has been removed for your other bucket? A new bucket you have created, right?
Yeah.
So this, you have removed the block public access, right? Show me the property permissions. Permissions. So block all public access. Oh, okay, fine. There's no bucket policy. Come down. Okay, fine. And in the original bucket also, there's no bucket policy, right? Permissions. No bucket policy. Okay. Setup. Show me your function, Lambda. Yeah, show me the code. Go down. What is the name of your buckets?
My bucket SNQ1 and my bucket SNW4.
SN?
W4 and SNQ1.
My bucket SNQ1 and SNW4. Okay, fine. Let me see your policy and role. Show me your, go down. Let me see your role here. What is the role you have used in, go down. Go down. Somewhere do you see a role? Are you seeing a role somewhere? I can't see from here, so you have to tell me. Check where you can see a role for your Lambda function. Go to your functions again. Go to your functions here. Okay, click on Lambda function. There's no role that is being shown here. So in this info, click on this function info. Expand that. There's nothing there. Okay. Come down. Here there is function URL, function ARN. Have you used the role?
Yeah, I have used.
Okay. So test runtime. Where do I see the role? And why is this? Yeah, 1 minute. Let me just check. Okay, show me your buckets again. So you uploaded in SNQ1, right?
SNQ1, yeah.
Show, click on that. And show me your other bucket. You refresh this. Okay, show me your role. IAM.
This one, my
Yeah.
Lambda S3.
Yeah. What the permission? My Lambda S3 policy. Okay. Show me the policy. Go down. Go down. I can click on the policy. No, I need to see the JSON. Go to policies. Yeah. My S3 Lambda policies. Click on that. Show me the JSON. What are these buckets?
Okay.
So you're using the same policy as I'm using. How can it then allow it to write?
Sorry.
Change the policies to reflect your buckets. The put should be your destination and your get should be your source. And go and upload a new object. Give it permissions, global access, grant. Check whether it is uploaded in your source bucket.
Thanks for that.
It's done?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, because your policy was not correct. Okay, so what is the message? I need to drop up a call. I'll join after the call. Need to join a call. We'll join back. Okay. Okay, fine. So we verified this. You can remove this copy objects from your destination bucket. Type delete and delete that bucket.
Hi, Sudhakar, can you share
Yeah.
your screen?
Yeah, sorry. Delete your bucket from your destination bucket. I just deleted that object, what was automatically copied. And then I'm going to go into buckets and deleting my destination bucket. It is not empty. Why does it say empty? Just permanently delete and empty and then delete. Copy the bucket name. So your bucket has been deleted. Similarly, go into your functions and delete your Lambda function. Once you have completed your exercise. Every time you upload an object in your source bucket, it will go and try to do the Lambda function. We don't want that to happen. So we'll remove the Lambda function. We have removed the roles, and in IAM is a free service. So you don't have to worry about roles, policies, users, user groups. Any of those are automatically, even if you leave them, they doesn't matter. They are all free. If you want, you can go and remove them whenever you have time. Now, IAM also is a global service, just like S3. If you have noticed, IAM, if you go into IAM, you will also notice it is not for a particular region. So automatically, whenever you select IAM, it is noticed the IAM dashboard, you will see the region as global. That means you create an user only once and it will be applicable for all regions. So you don't have to create users for every region. It is a one-time global service. It will automatically be applicable for all regions. Also, IAM has what is called as IAM has a least privilege principle. It follows a principle of least privilege, which means, for example, whenever you create it has got a least privilege. Means whenever you create an IAM user, a new IAM user, he has absolutely no permissions to work with. That means he cannot work with any service, he cannot work on any action. He has no permissions. This is the least privilege. It works on this principle. And then you add him or add permissions, policies, or add him to groups. So obviously, then he will be given permission. So policies that we have seen in IAM, policies are normally can be attached to either a group, can be attached to a user, can be attached to a role. So policies generally, we have seen how we can add it to the group, administrator access policy to our admin group. Then to the user, we can add a policy directly. To a role, we have seen the Lambda role, we have added a policy. To the EC2 access role, EB instance role, that also Elastic Beanstalk, that is EC2 role, we have added a policy. So we can add policies to groups, users, and roles, but not to identity providers. So these are certain things you should be keeping in mind. Now, one of the major things in AWS, the last part we'll be looking at is security, compliance, and disaster recovery. Already seen what are the different types, what is the mechanism of a disaster recovery. Now, there are actually 4 types of disaster recovery that you should be aware of. One is backup and restore. So typically this is the cheapest, but the most time. The second is a pilot light, where some of the critical services will be always running, other services will be totally off. So for example, databases. So in a DR scenario, what will happen? Let me just write the 4 things and then on standby. And then we have what is multi-site. These are the four things. So what happens is we have two sites. One is the primary site, one is the secondary site, and we are getting requests coming in from DNS service to these sites. And then in a backup and restore, normally what happens is you store it in your different backup formats. Maybe it is offsite. You'll have to bring the particular tapes or discs or whatever you have and then restore them. It takes certain amount of time. There's a lot of downtime, but it is the cheapest. In Pilot Lite, some of the services may be running. So for example, your databases may be both running in both the sites. That is your primary site and the secondary site, or the active site and the standby site, whatever you may call them. Other services like instances and all will not be running because they get created within a couple of minutes. So here they may be running in the live site, but not in the secondary site. So Pilot Lite, only the necessary critical services will be running in a warm standby. Some of the services which are required will be running. Say instead of 5 instances, let us say you have 5 instances running in your live site. Here there may be only 2 running. So 2 will be currently running and it will be sufficient enough for that much backup. But then if the main site goes down, then automatically this site will come up and all the 5 instances will immediately be triggered. But at least 2 instances will be running, so only 3 more instances will need to be created in the warm standby. But in the Pilot Lite, all 5 instances will need to be created. So backup and restore is typically in days or maybe hours. Pilot Lite is typically in say around minutes, 10 minutes or so. Warm standby is typically, let us say, in seconds, in a few minutes or a second. But multi-site is parallel. That means both the sites are always running at all levels. So every resource is running. It's a duplication of your site, synchronized in all four types. And the moment this goes down, then automatically what is happening is your secondary site will be up and running instantly. So obviously this is, so this site will be running all the time. So therefore what happens is, even if there's a major failure, your critical services and all services will be available in a multi-site. Now this, since 2 sites are running simultaneously with all resources, automatically this is the most cost expensive, but of course this is the least downtime, because it will immediately change over into the or get transferred into the secondary site, and it will automatically fail over, and it will be running and being accessible by all your users. Warm standby, as I told you, takes about a few seconds. Pilot Lite will take a few minutes. Backup and restore will take hours. So depending on the type of DR setup you work with, obviously you have both advantages and disadvantages. And obviously based on your organization's requirement, whether they are critical, not critical, and how much cost savings you want to set up, you can use any of these 4 different types of disaster recovery strategies. So these are the 4 types of strategies that you can work with for your disaster recovery. Finally, we look at security. Security is a very important aspect, and in security, there are some important services that you need to focus on. One of the major aspects of security in AWS is AWS states that security is a shared responsibility model. So what that means is not everything is AWS's responsibility in security. So there are certain things which, so I'll just quickly show you the So here it is, the security shared responsibility model. Now this is a shared responsibility model where AWS says security is a shared responsibility between AWS and our customers. So the bottom part, which is the physical actual aspect of the entire data centers, which is AWS global infrastructure. So their regions, their availability zones, their edge locations, and some of the basic or foundation services like compute, storage, database, and networking. Anything that you see in orange color is typically the responsibility of AWS. So all the physical servers, all the physical storage, all the physical databases, physical cabling, networking, the regions, the facilities, the buildings, the perimeters, the entire locations, availability zones, all of this is the responsibility of the provider, AWS. Whereas the remaining part in green and blue is typically the responsibility of the customer or yourself or the client or the organization. So what are you responsible for? All the types of encryption, whether it is client side or server side, whether network traffic protection, whether you want to use IDS, intrusion detection, protection, intrusion detection systems. So these are the types of protections, operating systems. So whether you want to use Windows, Linux, Ubuntu, Mac, and so on. Network and firewall configuration, security groups, NACLs, route tables, all of that is your responsibility. Your platform that you would develop with, your applications, your roles, users, policies that you set up, and finally your data that you store, whether it is an S3, Glacier, RDS, or DynamoDB, wherever you store the EBS volumes, yeah, and so on, EFS files. So remember, there's a shared responsibility model. All of the basic things that are the global infrastructure and the foundation services are the responsibility of AWS. Everything other than that is relating to the responsibility of customers. So you have to upload your applications, you are responsible for it. The code that you develop in the environment, you are the one who's required to, they will give you the building blocks, but the services is what they provide. But all of these you have to develop, manage, monitor, and take care of. So your responsibility will be to. Now in AWS, there are several services which are useful. So one of the services which they use is called as Web Application Firewall, or simply called as WAP. Now this Web Application Firewall is basically ideal for certain protection of threats, like if you have a SQL injection or you have cross-site scripting or server-side forgery attacks. So things of these nature on the client side, any requests which actually are open to such kind of threats. So those can be prevented using an application firewall. So you have an application firewall service called as WAF, and you can set up. Now WAF, for example, you can also set up where you can allow or deny, block or allow. So for example, let us say that all your customers are in India. So obviously, any request that should come to your instances, whether they're in Oregon, whether they're in uh, whether your servers are in any other region, though they may be placed in any region, the customers or the requests should only come from India because all your customers are in India. So you can set up a web application firewall where you can limit the requests to a particular country. So you can say requests should only come from India, and no other country, all other requests should be blocked. Or you can say country couldn't come from two countries, say USA and India, or you can say from some of these countries, a few countries. Global, you can create a condition that allow requests from certain countries or block requests from certain countries or all countries or these countries. So either allow or block. So you can set up such geo restrictions. You can set up SQL injection prevention, cross-site scripting, server-side forgery attacks. All of these can be done using a web application firewall before they enter your environment. So once requests are sent, you place a web application firewall at the edge of your AWS environment before they'll reach your load balancers or your CloudFront domain, and then those will be first blocked so that they won't even reach any of your other internal based resources. There's another service called as Shield, AWS Shield, and it comes in two uh, versions. One is standard and one is advanced. So both were providing you with different prices. This is for basically preventing you from distributed denial of service attacks. So you may have heard of distributed denial of service. So there, when there are a lot of requests that have been simulated or they have been targeted towards your network, automatically the load will be unable to be handled by your network or servers, and so your servers will fail and crash, and obviously that will lead to downtime, and you'll have to again restart your servers, and so that's all those DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks. If you want to make sure you track before they harm your environment, prevent them, and take the necessary advanced version for immediate help from AWS team, because they will also be monitoring your network, and they will also help you in immediately preventing or reinstating your environment, live environment, and making sure the DDoS has been stopped or probably eliminated. So DDoS attacks are done using Shield. They have a service called as Guard Duty, which uses AI and ML. That is, it uses artificial intelligence and machine learning for typically fraud detection. For people who try to impersonate, who try to utilize, say, for example, let us say you have a credit card, and the credit card physically you have used it in one country, say India, in today's shopping. And about 2 minutes later, the same card is used in a different origin, let us say in London. Again, the same card is being used. So obviously, it cannot happen that the card can travel instantly to that location. So it is not possible. They may think that it is possibly that somebody has got hold of your credit card details and is trying to misuse your details. So they will give you a warning saying that this transaction looks suspicious. It seems that the card details are from a different location. Please confirm, and so that you may have seen certain messages. So if it has to detect such, it has to be done instantly, because whenever you're doing a transaction, the transaction has to be approved or declined. So it has to be make a decision about whether that transaction is legal or not in a couple of seconds. And to do all of that, it has to use a resourcefulness of artificial intelligence and machine learning built-in programs, or models. And then Guard Duty is used for such type of fraud detection related. Plus, it monitors all of your different logs from certain your VPC flow logs, if you remember, your CloudWatch logs, CloudTrail logs, your DNS logs, and all of these logs. It tries and makes sure that there is a key management service. So also very important service, management service, which is used to set up your data encryptions for your encryptions and data keys protection. So generating the algorithm, what algorithm for the encryption and making sure that your data keys are protected. So obviously you have a service called as KMS, and it also uses a second type of a protection, a more effective protection, which is it also encrypts the key itself. So it is called as envelope protection. So envelope type of encryption and protection. So typically it even encrypts the data key itself. So just not creating a key, but it also encrypts the key. So you have double encryption, double protection, and then it takes care of managing, rotating the keys regularly, making sure that keys are active. If not, if you delete them, then they are removed, unused, whatever are not. And so all of these, they take care of the necessary managing, monitoring of the keys. And keys can also be stored in a different service called as hardware service model. So this is for the keys that you can service model, HSM module, where the keys are kept and the keys are self-healing, self-destructive in the sense that if someone tinkers with that hardware module, so keys are stored within this module. Somebody tinkers and tries to open or tries to force into entry into that module, it will automatically lock itself totally, and then you will not be able to open it at all. So obviously these are many protections for AWS related services. So security wise, they have many services here, but we have listed some of the most important services that they are today providing you with, and you can utilize this for your day-to-day working of your different workloads as well as your applications, data, and so on. So remember, security of data, that is customers' data, is your responsibility. They act like custodians and make sure that everything in all respects, they have the necessary types of preventions, the latest of technologies, the latest of tools, the latest of hardware devices, the software algorithms, everything they make sure that they have the latest and the updated ones, the advanced ones, which take care of the necessary protections to your entire resources within the AWS environment. So this is an overall thing about AWS. So we have seen many of these services. We have done several hands-on labs to understand some of the functionalities. Some of them we have also looked at in brief, like today, some of these services. I have sent you an official study guide because each of these services, if we want to do hands-on, will take us a lot of time, where today time is a limitation. And so ultimately you have the resources available to you. AWS also provides you on their site free digital training. So you can go ahead and go and check out those particular links and resources. They have extensive documentation which you can look and work with. And then you have tutorials, then you can refer to other labs that we have worked with. I have sent you several lab steps for some of these services. You can look at some code examples, you can look at forums, you can look at practice papers, different other sites and tutorials, which are, I mean, sites like if you have seen Coursera or Udemy, or if you have seen Pluralsight and um, so on. So you have many of these sites which offer you some of these courses at a very highly discounted price. You may want to go through those courses as well. But then it would be better if you try and do everything on your own, so that with hands-on, you get more practice and more understanding of your concepts and the necessary features. If you want to attempt for your certification, you need to definitely make an effort. It does require hard work because the exams are not surely easy. But yes, it does carry a lot of weight. A certification in AWS shows that you have sufficient knowledge to work with AWS in its various uh, specializations, whether it's a solutions architect, whether it is a developer, whether it is security specialty, whether it's machine learning, networking, or the DevOps engineering, whatever it may be, you will be certified in those particular areas. Okay, with that, we come to the end of the training for this course. And we have about half an hour's time left. I'll give you about 5 to 10 minutes break. And then I think Mahima can distribute the feedback papers to the participants along with the test. So you have 20 questions to attempt. There's no negative marking. You are supposed to complete these within the time limit till 2 o'clock. And use your discretion, understanding uh, where there is a need for multiple answers. It has been indicated that you need so many answers to be provided, and both of those or three of those answers, whatever number of answers are required for, all of them should be correct for the answer to be considered as correct. No partial marking, so no half answers will be awarded. Everything will be either fully correct or fully incorrect. Passing is 12 out of 20. So you go through and complete your papers, and later on you will be given the answer sheet where you can self-evaluate and honestly check out whether you have performed as per the level you desired. You think you have understood this entire training. Okay, guys. So please fill up the feedback accordingly to the management. Give your best feedback, honest feedback, what you think you really learned in these 10 days of training, whether it has been useful to you, whether you have been able to follow all of these different services, whether you can make use of them in your future career or maybe in your job as well. Whatever you feel, suggestions that should be implemented for further batches or new trainings that I will be undertaking, anything that you would like to add constructively, please go ahead and do so. Thank you, guys. Take a break. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Mahima?
Yes.
Yes, Mahima,
Yes,
there were 20 people at the beginning of the session, and there are totally 15 now. So I don't
understood.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Sure.
hope you are aware that people have either informed you
Have left.
accordingly.
Right.
Yeah,
You've
so
been pinging me as well, so I'm keeping a tap on it.
okay, great. So I'm leaving it to you now. You can provide them with the necessary feedback link as well as the exam paper or the assessment test paper link, and they can start working on it. I'm here in any case. I'll be back in 5 minutes, and then if they have any doubts on any of these aspects, they can check with me.
Sure. So are we giving them a break of 5 minutes, Sudhakar, or
Yeah,
shall
I'm
we?
giving them a break of 5 minutes. So just if they
Oh,
want to, I mean, up to them. So they can take a break. Anyway, I leave it to them. They can take a 5 minutes break, come back and fill up the feedback, and then start off with the assessment test. Please fill up the feedback before the assessment test, guys.
yeah. So I think this would work. We can give them a break of 5 minutes. I have
Yeah,
requested Priya to join the session for a few minutes. She wants to speak with the participant and set the context for way forward, Sudhakar. So
sure,
she
great.
will be talking to the participants for like 2 to 3 minutes, and then they can continue with the post assessment. They'll
Oh,
get
oh
enough
yes,
time for it.
great, great. That will be great. So 5 minutes, I
Oh,
think there's an interval, right? There's a break.
yes, yes. There'll be a break of 5 minutes.
Okay,
We will
thanks.
join at 1:35.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. You
Thank you.
can join back at 1:35. Thanks, Sudhakar.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks. Bye. Okay, guys, I'm back here, and I hope you are also back for the feedback and the assessment test.
Yes. So before, as discussed, Sudhakar, before we go ahead with the assessment and feedback, we
Yeah.
have Priya with us.
Yeah.
So I'll just hand over the stage to Priya to speak a few words and tell the participants what is the way forward.
Sure.
Priya, over to you. She, I think, left due to some technical glitch.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
added her back. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Priya. Could you hear us?
Hello, hi, Maima.
Yes, Priya. So, Priya, before we start with the feedback and post assessment, I thought I would give the stage to you to address the participants with the way forward.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maima. Yes. So, hi everyone. How is everyone doing? Hi, Sudhakar.
All good, Mahima. Good, Priya.
Hi,
All
Sorry.
good.
Priya.
All good.
Great. Yeah, great. So I know all of you had a wonderful session. It all shows with the attendance. I know most of you were regular, to this session. This is the first session that we're doing here, not as user ready. We've already done many couple of sessions of AWS, and we've always got a great feedback about this program. And that's why, we wanted to have the program this year also. So all of you know that AWS comes under a basic, a foundation cluster, and it's very important that you have a certification for AWS this year. And we all know that 2 certifications are mandatory, and it's linked to your KRA, right? Out of which the 2 certifications predominantly should be from your, foundation cluster. Now, AWS being part of the foundation cluster, we realized it's very important that all of you attend, apply it in your job, first thing. Second thing, and take a relevant AWS certification with your manager's approval. First of all, in discussion with your manager, and then in manager's approval. Very, very important. So please go through the, I hope all of you have gone through the learning properly, have practiced whatever Sudhakar has told. Sudhakar, of course, is a very seasoned trainer, a very senior trainer, and subject matter experts. So please practice whatever is said. Sudhakar, I hope you will be sharing the reference material after the training,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will be
Yeah.
sharing.
Great. So there is a reference material after the training which Sudhakar will share with Mahima, and Mahima will share it with all of you. So please have that as well. And start taking up certifications, because if you give a gap, you will tend to forget, right? It's human psychology, you will tend to forget. So start preparing for your certification at the earliest so that you can give it, so that you don't forget whatever you've learned. And of course, this training again is customized to the certification. So, not that everything in the certification can be taught in the learning, in the training, of course. There's some things, very small percentage, which you have to go through yourself, but predominantly most of them have been covered in this training program. So that's a humble request. Today being the last day, so I wanted to emphasize on the importance of why we are conducting this AWS training program for all of you, right? So Sudhakar, has always, I know you've been a great facilitator, and always people have given a great feedback about this training program. And thank you so much for facilitating this program,
Thank you.
Sudhakar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and giving me the opportunity to be once again associated with your organization, with all of you. So yeah, it has been a 10-day course that we have completed, and I do hope all of them have learned all the new services of AWS and will apply the same in their certification, learning, and career.
Yeah, I'm sure
Thanks.
they will. Anyone who wants to say anything? Participants? Any questions, any inputs, any feedback? Would you like to add anything?
It was good. The training was very good and understanding.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Gautam. Yes.
Yes,
Anyone
Priya, it
else?
was real. Yeah, it was really a useful session, right? I would say. mm, uh, I was not, aware of this AWS, but yeah, I do have good exposure of Azure. But with this training now, I would say I do have a good concepts learned, for AWS as well.
good. So please
Thank you.
take up a
Thank you so much,
session.
Sudhakar. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really an awesome
Pleasure.
session, I would
Welcome.
say.
Great.
Yeah, to be precise, it was like from very scratch, so it was kind of easy to learn. But it was a good training for me as well.
Great. So thank you so much. So all of you, please start preparing for your certification in discussion with your manager, and please start applying these learnings at your work wherever, whenever possible. Right? So there's a feedback form link that Maima sent. It will just take you exactly 2 minutes to fill up the feedback form. Please do fill the feedback form. Right? And Maima, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Thanks for being part of the session. I'll hand it over to Mahima. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Priya.
Priya.
Thank you, Sudhakar, once again for conducting and facilitating the session smoothly. And now it's time for the post assessment and feedback. So people, please share your feedback for the session. Also, once you're done with the feedback, it'll take less than 5 minutes. You can start with the post assessment. You have time till 2 p.m. to finish the post assessment. There are 20 questions, and Sudhakar has already shared the guideline with you how you have to complete the post assessment. So over to you, all of you. We will get back at 2:30. Make sure that please be fair while you're attempting the question. Don't look for answers. Do it yourself. This is just to understand where you are. This is for yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Please don't Google the answers.
Yes, Gautam.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that
have
is a
something.
common way people adopt, when they are not aware of. Yeah, please don't look at any resources while referring to these questions. With your honest and whatever you have learned during these 10 days, please attempt the questions. It doesn't matter whether the score is low, high, medium, whatever it may be. Please attempt it so that even if you get to know your way, what you stand today, you can definitely improve upon it in the coming days.
I have a question for Sudhakar.
Yeah, sure.
It is regarding the billing.
Yeah.
So I'd like to present my screen.
Yeah. Sure. Share it.
I think the last lab we did replication of the S3 bucket storage, and there is a charge which is directed from for my account.
Okay.
So it is simple storage service in the Mumbai and as well as Oregon region.
Okay.
I think I have deleted the buckets, but I think it was supposed to be a free storage, right?
Yeah, it is a free service actually. So what you can do is you can write to AWS again, tell them this is your first free tier account and you have used it only one time for the testing purposes and have been charged. So kindly waive off these charges.
Okay, and here it's saying that per job fee for batch operations, and I would like to know what is job fee for the batch operations.
Per job, Amazon storage. I mean, it was a one-time thing. Whatever you have replicated, it's always considered to be a batch operation itself, because it's a one-time type of a replication. It is not. So it will be considered as one job. I don't know why it is separated as one job, but anyway, they have charged you, so you can just mention that there have been charges and the same should be waived off.
Okay, okay. So even the replication lab, that is totally free, right? It's like only the this actual storage that will be charged.
Yeah, only storage. Which storage? Storage. No storage will be charged. Storage
up to 5 GB.
Yeah, up to 5 GB. Was it more than 5 GB?
No. It was just KBs or
Yeah.
MBs.
Yeah, so obviously it will not be charged. So if they have charged you for the storage, if they should only charge you for the NAT gateway.
Okay, I didn't use NAT gateway.
Yeah, so then they should not charge you for anything. If they have charged you for anything else, then please let them know. If you have used any other instance, EC2 instance other than T2 or T3 micro, then again they will charge you.
Okay. Yeah,
so
that's it.
Otherwise, if you are incorrectly charged, please let them know and they will definitely waive off the charges.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and if you're not going to use AWS account, guys, make sure you close the account. Do not keep it active because someone can get to hold of your credentials and then will misuse it. Yes, Ravindra.
Yeah, thank you, Sudhakar, for
Yeah.
teaching us from the technical point of view to the lab.
Oh,
It was very useful. Just have one question. So
sure.
you have shared the training material today, right? For the AWS
Official
certified
study guide.
solution.
Yeah, the official study
Yeah.
guide.
So
Yeah.
so like for example, if I want to apply for the certification, right?
Right.
The first one will be the AWS cloud practitioner, right? Not the architect one.
Yeah, but
So
now what has happened is the cloud practitioner has been revised and there's a new version coming up in, I think, September.
okay.
August is where you can start registering for that new exam. So now they have included many services and many these things, but those generally are on the basis of what those services are practically doing. So generally, say for EC2, you're using it for creating instances, managing instances, and so on. But all the elastic load balancing, the auto scaling, all of these things do not come under cloud practitioner. So they come under solutions architect. So what we have learned is much more in detail, which is
Okay.
at the solutions architect level. So you can attempt the cloud practitioner and you should be aware of all the services which they have mentioned in the exam guide. You can go into the site. I'm going to give you some resources that you can go through for the
Yes.
certification. And you can look at what are the services covered for that certification and go through all of those documentation and actually frequently ask questions in that study guide. You will be able to
Okay.
then check out even through the documentation. You can check out some of the services. They have tutorials and they have digital training modules that you can watch and you can learn from. So
Okay.
those are also provided and they can be useful for you for appearing for the certification. But I would advise if you want to go for certification, since you have a deeper knowledge of many of the services of AWS, try to work for solutions architect because that is more considered important rather than cloud practitioner. Cloud practitioner is generally meant for sales and pre-consultants and other people who need to be aware of AWS as such and not necessarily the actual working of the various services.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So it's up to you whether you want to take up cloud practitioner or cloud, solutions architect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Mahima,
Yes, Sudhakar.
you have already distributed the assessment test, right?
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
It's
So fine.
already the link is already with them.
Great. So
I
do
think two of them have already completed it as well.
okay, fine, wonderful. So can I leave the session or do you want me to be around till 2 o'clock if there are any questions for
It's
anyone?
it's it's fine, Sudhakar. I think they can participants can stay back and complete. You can leave the session.
I mean, I can still stay till 2 in case they do have a
No, no,
difficult.
it's not. There's no problem. I don't see they have any queries as such.
Yeah.
However, we would need your help because there are people who go back and they get some queries. So we will forward it to you. If you
Yeah,
could
sure.
help them out with those queries, it will be helpful.
Sure, sure. So only one thing, guys, in case you come, there's an option in any of those questions for a service that may not have been covered. Do not worry about it. You can just ignore it. You can, because that will definitely not be the answer for that question. So it may be happening on 1 or 2 questions probably, but I'm sure most of them, I mean, 99% we have covered all of the services that will appear in that assessment test. And of course, anything that you have difficulty in, you can always reach out to Mahima and Mahima will get back to me. I will provide you the necessary replies to those questions. Thanks, guys, and wish you all the best, both for your career and certification. And look forward for future trainings with you in user trading from my side. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Sudhakar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mahima. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Sudhakar.
Bye.
Thanks, Sudhakar.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sudhakar.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hope everyone is doing the post assessment. I see 3 of you have submitted the responses. But rest, please ensure to complete it by 2 p.m. Thank you. Yashwant, Sachin, Sachet, and Sarthak. They have completed and posted the response. Others, please complete it. You have 5 minutes left. Ankit, Ranjana, Mali, Chinchukumari also submitted the responses. Others, 3 minutes left. Please make it quick. The ones completed can leave the meeting. Ankit, you can leave the meeting. It's fine.